Melissa, thanks for having me. Happy holidays. I think there's, obviously, some support for it from the street, the market giving the stock a bunch of credit this afternoon. The timing is a little bit off. The healthcare community usually looks for these deal announcements right around the beginning of January into some broker conferences, so a couple of days early maybe. But it's very reminiscent, if the deal happens, of Celgene, Allergan, and Alexion of the past several years, where these large cap biotech companies trading at very, very low multiples get taken out.
Who would be next? I mean, we saw not just Biogen go higher, as we had mentioned. So who is a logical next sort of candidate if Biogen is taken out?
It's so difficult. There aren't that many large cap biotechs left. I think, I look at Vertex and BioMarin as, potential takeout candidates. They've been mentioned or speculated in the past, given their size and the pipelines and drugs on the market. But those two, given where they're trading now, do make some sense. And there's hundreds of billions, probably close to $500 billion worth of M&A firepower from large cap pharma companies to do something. So those two resonate. Horizon Pharma, HZMP is another one that investors continue to talk about as a possible one. And, countless others in the public and private realm in biotech that are smaller.
It's interesting. Over in June, we saw Biogen, and this, traded north of $450 on the back of that Alzheimer's news, which was historic. We talked about it on the show, I remember the day. I would imagine, maybe you can push back on this one, I think if Biogen were to get bought for $42 billion, I think that's just way too cheap given the potential upside they still have.
I agree with you fully. I think what's going to happen here, in order for Biogen shareholders to feel like they're getting any sort of value in the company in the same right, would be some sort of CVR or carve-out for future Alzheimer's drug development and clinical trial data, which we are going to have in the second half of next year, roughly. So if there can be a carve-out of value, another, $50, $100 a share, whatever it winds up being, that could be a kicker that gets this thing done. But clearly, I agree fully. The price paid now is a far cry from the highs we saw in that news.
Jared, you mentioned the enormous firepower that big cap pharma has in terms of the ability, the arsenal to make deals. Would you be an investor in, say, the XBI, some of the smaller names, just because, as you had mentioned, the bigger targets, there aren't too many out there?
I think so. This has been the most frustrating trade for healthcare investors this year by far, I think, myself included, just sort of like realizing how poor the sector could do versus the market. And there's been a decent amount of news, including M&A. We've had, half a dozen takeouts announced just in the second half of the year. I would be, the one thing that gives me pause, and I've commented on it a few times, is just this investment cycle in private biotech, which I think has taken a lot of capital out of the public arena and into these privately held companies. That's the one thing I'm kind of looking at, and the one thing that makes me a little bit hesitant. But longer term, for sure, I think the XBI here is a great trade.
Jared, great to get your thoughts. Thanks so much, and Happy New Year to you.